It is 7 o'clock. I will call the meeting to order. It is the December 6th, 2016 meeting of the Monadnock School District. First order of business are public comments. Or do we have anyone signed up? Are there any members of the public that wish to make a public comment? And I'll get you that.
I'm passing around something I've passed around before. And I figure if I pass it around enough time, it'll sink in.
Thank you.
My name is Jane Fortson, and I'm speaking as a taxpayer from the town of Swansea. And I'm speaking with regard to a meeting that took place last night, the Finance Committee, in which it was very hard to bite my tongue. Well, the administrative team did a lot of work, and I mean a lot of work, to come to the Finance Committee with several tiers of proposed cuts. It was with great surprise that the comment was made. The administration made their decision based on education, but forgot the politics. Really? I thought that's what we were here to do, not the politics. Okay? For those that were there or that were not there last night, it became and I will quote, "We want the cuts to come back without Emerson, Troy, or Gilsum being touched." Well, that just leaves one town schools. That's not a cooperative district. Okay? In this, the role of a board member, first line, second paragraph. Schools exist to provide appropriate educational opportunities for our children. And we did that last night to the best of our ability. It is not easy to make these cuts, and no one sat there gleefully with a red pen saying, we're going to cut and cut and cut. Because you all know I like to save money. But I was not very helpful in some of these cuts because a lot of them turned my stomach, and if they turn my stomach, they certainly turn the stomach of many of these other administrators that right now are scraping to try and get some staff here to work with the students. The last paragraph in this, the leadership team should be focused on end results. The board should ask questions of what, why, how much, and how well. Board action should be focused on mission, goals, policy, standards, advocacy, and communication. But I guess they forgot to leave politics in that.
Thank you. Are there any other members of the public? Yes. When you come up, just introduce who you are, where you're from, and if you can limit your comments to 3 minutes or less would be great.
Okay. Hannah Gagnon, I'm from Troy. I came a few weeks ago or a few meetings ago just advocating for the Gilsum STEAM Academy. I just want to reiterate that this school is very unique. I've taught for 10 years. What they're doing there is special. My son is, for the first time, flourishing at a place, and there's something magical happening there. So I've said it before, but if a decision to cut funding to Gilsum happens, I would just strongly urge each and every one of you to visit the school before making a decision. Go on a Thursday, it's a STEAM day. They just have the opportunity to do lots of things. So I would be really disappointed if any decisions were made by people that have not gone to the school. So, under 3 minutes.
Thank you. The microphones are only for the television. So any member of the public that is coming up or any board member that is making a comment, I have the ability to project my voice fairly well, so you can hear me. But other members may not have that same skill. So as you, either member of the public, make sure that you come to the podium. It's for the cameras and not for the listening public. But we are working on getting an audio system in here so that it will do multi-purpose of both projecting in this space as well as for the televisions. So anyways, any other members of the public that wish to make public comments? Okay. Seeing none, we will move forward. So matters that require board action. The first item is the review of the draft warrant articles. Yes, ma'am?
When would it be appropriate for me to ask?
This would be a great time.
I'd just like to ask for a moment of silence in memory of Emily Stone. She was a long-term first grade teacher at Mount Caesar, and she passed away on Monday morning.
We can respectfully take a moment of silence. Thank you. Thank you, Betty. It's always hard when we lose one of our own.
Yep.
So moving on. Warrant articles. We have draft warrant articles in front of us. They're going to remain on the agenda until we make a motion to move them forward. So what we're passing around is the second draft of them.
Have any of these changed since the last time?
And I would look for Jane to inform us of any changes or modifications.
The first page, other than putting draft number 2 up in bold and yellow so that we can kind of keep track, there's no changes to that page. If you flip the page, Article 6, under the MDEA contract, you're going to see some numbers starting to populate in there. I am going through and just double checking everything. So far, everything looks pretty much okay, but I'm just double checking everything and just making sure we've included anything that was a change in the contract in here, so you'll see that populate the rest of the way by the next meeting. Under Article 7 and Article 8, those I highlighted in red and denoted in black that the Finance Committee has a motion to remove those, and those are the only changes that I've made at this point, but I wanted to just make you aware of those changes, and I will keep bringing this each meeting. In the hopes, too, that the board will start to weigh in on some of these. You may not want $50,000 from any fund balance left over to go to our special ed expendable trust, but I'm putting these out here just for your consideration. And if you have something else to bring forth, by all means. I've already uploaded a lot of these to the state website, at least the verbal pieces of them, but I've not done any of the numerical or finalized anything because I can't until the board has their stamp of approval on it. Okay?
Okay. So at the last meeting in Roxbury, there was some discussion with regard to Article 7 and 8. And you'll notice that on the agenda, if we were to remove them while Finance has a motion to remove them, it's a motion for reconsideration as the full board had already approved them. So the motion to reconsider those articles, if anyone that voted in the affirmative wishes to make a motion for reconsideration, that would be appropriate at this time.
I would make that motion to reconsider Article 7 and 8.
Okay, it's been moved. Is there a second? Second. Moved and seconded. Okay, discussion. So this is a motion to reconsider. This is not removing them at this time. It's just we're going to put it on the table as a motion to potentially remove them from the warrant articles. Yes, Nick?
Yeah, we spent a lot of time over the past year, I hope I'm speaking loud enough for everybody, talking about how we can improve things in our district, ways that we can really make a difference when it comes to the lives of people in our community. And one of the things that was brought to us over the past couple of years was a number of things from the group Impact Monadnock. And this is a group of local politicians, local police departments, teachers, business leaders, members of the community, talking about how we can make those changes. And one of the largest, one of the best ways that we can make that impact is by improving the lives and focusing the attention on children that are young, from birth to third grade. And I'm really in favor of Article 7 for ensuring that those students are being nourished properly. I think it's something that's very important, and I think it would be a shame to see that go away. At the very least, I would like it to make it so that the members of the public can decide for themselves on how they feel about that. It's not something that the board or the budget committee is going to pass. It's something that our community is going to pass if they want to pass it. So I'd like to see that stay.
Any further discussion, Jim? And then you, sir.
Yeah, this was discussed by the Finance Committee on November 16th, and the administration presented a discussion about that. And I would like to just read from the minutes. There was some discussion about it, not a lot, but a fair amount. Lisa Witt explained it would take additional staff and additional cleanup time if the breakfast articles were passed. We would have to feed and breakfast 800 students at the MRHS in approximately 15 minutes. Lisa Witt and Jane Fortson both would not recommend this. B. Mitchell, who was present, was not part of the Finance Committee, but he was present, would ask the board to rescind the motion. It was explained that the article for free breakfast does not affect the funding due to the district, and then the motion was made by myself to reconsider the affirmative motion for breakfast, and it was seconded by Michael Blair. The vote was unanimous for those people present, and then the final statement was made by Michael Blair. He commented it was not a bad thought, but we should have done our homework. So the Finance Committee at the time was unanimous with those of us who were there and the other members who were also present from the board in asking for this reconsideration.
Lisa?
The motion that we are trying to reconsider is to create a proposed warrant article that shall read to see if the MRSD will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $87,518 to provide breakfast to all elementary school students in the district. The motion was to create a proposed warrant article. We did that. I don't think we need to reconsider that. So now we're at the stage of, we have the proposed warrant article. Do we want it on there or do we not want it on there? I don't think this is a motion for reconsideration.
I've been having a little bit of heartburn over this because of Robert's Rules of Order and how process of motions are made. This is a little bit different because this is a warrant article versus a motion that was with regard to anything else. So I understand what you're saying. The rationale of the reconsideration versus just the removal is because we voted in the affirmative to put it on the proposed warrant articles. That was my rationale, and I've been going back and forth versus exactly what you're saying.
The final outcome's probably going to be the same. I just wanted to make that point.
Absolutely. Nick, and then Wynn.
Yeah, I just wanted to make the point that right now, every student has the ability, if they had the money, to go and get breakfast. It's something that should be in place. We should have the capability of feeding our students if they all had money. Or if they all had parents that took into consideration their children's needs. Sometimes it's they don't have the ability to. Sometimes for some students, unfortunately, it's neglect. So the notion that we don't want to pass this and fund breakfast for everybody because we don't have the capability of handling the logistics of that endeavor, I think is I'm going to use a strong word, lazy. Okay? So if we don't have the capability of providing breakfast for our students, we should already be able to do that if they already had the money and ability to purchase it. It's kind of like shorting the students in a way.
Wynn?
I'm going to pass.
Okay. Jane and then Betty.
Yeah, how do I word this? You better up your warrant article, because you will not only eat up your entire grant that you get for your federal funds, because we will now have to hire more staff in the morning. I don't know, have you ever been to a lunchtime here?
I've been to lunches in schools.
Have you been to a lunchtime here?
Not here.
Well, it's
This
pretty.
is for breakfast, not for lunch.
It's still the same number of students. You still are face to face with the same number of students. And it is long lines, and it is frantic on the part of the staff. You would also have to have staff in place here in the building. No one's here until 7:15. That's their start time.
So what would you do if everybody showed up for breakfast?
That's the
They-
question. I'd have to have more staff. You have to go on the assumption that you have everybody showing up. So I've got to add food service staff that I don't have enough in my grant to do. I'm going to have to add either teaching staff or paraprofessionals or someone to be here to attend to the students, because their start time is not till 7:15. And we may have to alter the bus routes, because you're giving them 15 minutes to have lunch from the time the staff are here to oversee the students. So somewhere we're going to have to be adding more funds to compensate for that. And it was just, these are items, I brought them up the night that this came up, because this hit me as a surprise that we had not looked at all these factors. And Lisa Witt asked our principals, and I don't want to misspeak, but they were all in favor of this. Not one of them are saying, we don't want to do this. It's the logistics of doing it. I can see a couple of them nodding out there. In all the schools, the logistics of doing it and getting that many students served in a short time without staff in place to oversee them. I mean, Mount Caesar's not even big enough to put all your kids in there. But we wanted to close close one of the schools and put all Swansea kids in one school last night, so I don't know how we were going to do that. But it's not big enough to hold all those kids, so in 15 minutes, we're going to run that many kids through a room that can't even hold them.
So what
And
would-
let's take the food back to the rooms and complain about ants some more. I mean, so we're going to have to get more custodial staff in here to clean the rooms. I mean, it's got an effect that just keeps rippling.
Yeah, Betty and then Bob.
I'm in favor of leaving them there and letting the public decide whether they think they should be funded or not. We're here to advocate for kids when many other constituencies aren't. And I think this is one way to do that. And I understand trying to work out logistics. That's 3/4 of what a principal does every day, is trying to make things gel. But I don't know, as a board member, I feel responsible to leave it there.
Bob and then Nick.
I believe we're discussing Article number 7, which is limited to elementary. And my comments at the Finance Committee were relative to the middle high school and the logistics mentioned there. I feel differently about the two articles. I feel much more strongly about elementary than high school. And if you're talking Mount Caesar, kids have been eating at their classroom desks at Mount Caesar for decades. And I believe Betty can support that.
Yes.
Should
Thank
they be?
Nick?
Yeah, but I'm just going to make maybe I wasn't clear in the point that I was making earlier. Tomorrow, you could have all your students show up and expect to have breakfast. This is something that I see it maybe something that was overlooked, that was, if you say it was discovered from the discussion that was brought up last month or the month before. I think it's something that needs to be considered. If we have students, if tomorrow, if all the students showed up and we would be unable to provide them breakfast, if they had money in hand, I think that's a problem. And to say that we're not going to, the way to solve that is to ensure that some students who don't have the ability to pay for breakfast is to block those students or adopt a policy or not adopt a policy that doesn't allow them to have breakfast. That's concerning to me.
Jane?
We have free and reduced. We have done and do everything we can to get that information out to our families. Those that have the need, we hope we are servicing. But do you understand, do you know the numbers for those that have it available, what percentage actually use it? They have it available.
What I'm saying is if we had 800 students tomorrow that showed up for breakfast at the various elementary schools, and again, I'm with Bob on, I'm more in favor of Article 7 than 8. I'm concerned about from the things that we've been talking about in here for the past 2 years about how we can improve this district. It's to focus that attention and resources on students when they're very young. And I as a board member, I see that as something that's a very strong positive, and I think it's even made more of a positive by opening it up to the public to make that decision if they want to make that decision.
I do understand that, if I may, but you need to change your number. It's not at all accurate. And that's what I'm going to tell you. You need to reconsider your number.
Lisa and then Nick.
We've had the Finance Committee ask us to take this off the warrant, and we've had the original sponsor, the person who brought the idea to us, ask us to remove the 2 articles as well. And while I think that this is a wonderful idea, I don't think this is the right year for us to be bringing things forward to the voters that are luxury or nice to have. I think we have a lot of people who are really hurting, and this would be sort of a luxury for us. And what if the articles pass and there's not enough money in them, and we have to steal dollars from someplace else when there are no dollars to steal from anywhere? I'm really afraid of these 2 going on the warrant.
Okay, Phyllis and then Nick.
Perhaps this is something that if people feel that passionate about, we should look into a fruit and vegetable program that is offered by the federal government. Find out if kids could grab an apple or a banana, and maybe we should study it, do the homework. This came on pretty sudden, and there's other things in this warrant. And believe me, I don't want to take anything away from kids, but there's other things that we want to try to get past, and I think the taxpayers are saturated at this point.
Nick, one last comment.
So, as far as the funding for it, this would be raised in the warrant article, so it wouldn't be stolen from another portion of the budget, from my understanding. The warrant article is to raise those funds.
Right, it would increase the budget.
Correct.
Right, but Jane's saying
It
that
wouldn't increase the budget, it would be funds that would be raised in addition to the existing budget, correct?
Yeah, that's
Am I
raising the
correct?
budget.
I'm just,
Yes.
okay.
Yeah.
It gets added to the budget, Nick, once it's
Correct.
approved.
Yes. So, that's not an issue. The second
it is
thing.
if $87,000 is not enough.
So that's what I'm getting to now. The $87,000 is just to fund the students who aren't able to pay. This additional, to feed the logistics and administrative portion of it, that's something that needs to be done anyways. That's a completely separate problem. If tomorrow we had all our students show up, you're going to have that problem whether this passes or not. You're still going to have those logistics issues of how you get all the kids, whether they eat in the classroom, at their desk, or not. That's a completely separate problem. I'm trying to be clear on that. And then the last one is, when you're talking about a best year for it, do we think that next year is going to be a better year? Or the year after that, the way that funding is occurring? So how long do you want to wait for that? Do you want to drag it out? I would like to have it on here so that the public can make the decision. I think that's a reasonable solution to this.
When, and then Jim.
Yeah, you made a statement that it was just for the ones that can't pay. This 87,000 is for all students to eat, not just the ones that can't pay. So, otherwise it'd be kind of an expensive lunch.
Right.
Jim?
Yeah, before we get too tangled up in what we're doing here, I need to get a bit of a clarification because I get kind of 2 different responses up at the front table. One was the question of whether this was a motion to rescind or whether it's a motion to remove. So I think
This is a motion to reconsider, and if it passes, then we would have a second motion to rescind.
I agree with that because that was the way the Finance Committee had brought it forward.
Correct.
The only question is there a 2/3 requirement on the reconsideration?
I don't believe so. I think it's just majority. What I was just looking at my notes, yeah, it's just majority. A rescind is 2/3. A
But the
reconsideration.
rescind usually takes place at the same meeting. That's why there's a
Yes.
requirement for the 2/3.
Anything further? So I'll just chime in. Okay.
Very short. I'd also like to make a point that one of our student representatives also brought up the fact that this would be I don't believe it was your son.
Was not.
There was another student representative that said this would be a very positive thing. And the limited contributions that they made this year, that was one of the contributions, that this would be a very positive thing for students.
So, before we take the vote, I just wanted to be clear as to how the motions are, or how the motion is currently, and then moving forward. So the motion is to reconsider. If that passes, then we would have a motion to rescind, which would need to pass by 2/3 in order for it to be removed. If the motion to reconsider does not pass, then we don't even have a motion to rescind. Okay, so we're only addressing Article 7 at this time. And the last comment I want to make is my comments that Jim articulated about what I said in finance is exactly true. That I believe this is a great idea. I firmly believe that we do not have enough money in the warrant article. We would require more staff, more busing, or altered busing. It has a ramification that is larger than what the warrant article is today. That's unfortunate because it was passed and with the number that it has, and we have to live with that. Deliberative, if we don't rescind it, we could potentially change it at deliberative by 10%, correct? 10% up? I'm missing my numbers. We potentially have the ability to modify it at deliberative. But I believe we don't have enough money to do it appropriately and to the best of our ability with regard to this amount. I think it's a great idea. I wish that we could make it happen, but I also know that we're in a challenge with regard to the budget, with regard to everything. So, but I'm just here facilitating.
There's some opinion in that, too.
Well, there is. We all have an opinion. Yeah, and then we'll take the vote. We'll have Jim and Wynn will be the last, and we'll take the vote.
Again, I'm just trying to deal with the procedures in advance so we don't get too tangled up. You said we're going to vote to reconsider first. If the reconsideration passes, that brings us right back to where we were originally, with this being presented as it was presented to us to vote either up or down on. That's where we would stand. So I would say that we don't have to, at that point, then vote to rescind, because it's brand new now. It's just as if it were put right on the table again, in which case we are going to just vote on whether yes or no, whether to accept the proposal, because that's the way it was. It was a proposal for this article.
Let me give that a little bit more thought. When
Yeah, these articles are not set in stone. We have not set the warrant. We are building the warrant. So basically, we can change and make changes at any board meeting to the wording, to the numbers, without a big hassle. Once we say we approve, we go for this or don't approve for it, then it becomes more of a stone article. You know, it's written. So I don't think we have to worry so much. We just have to vote whether we want to take it off the warrant right now to reword it or remove it. And that doesn't stop anybody from filing a petition either.
okay, in thinking through the process and reviewing Robert's rules further, I would agree with that statement. So we don't need a motion to rescind because the warrants are not
No,
finalized.
they're not set.
So the motion will be to remove Article 7 from the warrant. Okay?
Who made the motion?
Right.
Well, that's what the finance committee is making
Okay,
a motion to remove.
I forgot that.
Yeah. That's what you have on your paper, even though we talked about rescinding it at the finance committee.
No, the motion from the finance meeting was to reconsider.
Okay.
That was the exact motion. And my problem with what you just said, like, again, procedurally, that's why I'd like us to get it correct the first time. I agree with most of what Wynn said. The problem is, we already have, as a board, procedurally, we already voted to put this on the warrant. So in order to even get to that, we have to first of all reconsider it, and then we can remove it or do whatever we want with it. But there's not necessarily a motion to rescind what we did. I still think we need 2 votes because we need to reconsider the action that we took. We did take an action. And so we need to reconsider it first, and then it's as if it was presented on a brand-new, as a brand-new proposal, and vote on it appropriately.
Procedurally, however, if you rescind, if you reconsider to remove it, we have to rescind it, and the rules of rescinding requires a 2/3
That's,
vote.
the rules of rescinding do.
Right, which is what we would have to, we would reconsider and we would rescind our previous vote. There is no vote to remove. There is no parliamentary procedure, Robert's rules to remove. It's a rescind.
But a motion to rescind takes place at the meeting in which it occurred. That's the purpose of a motion to rescind, and that's why it requires a 2/3. So in other words, it took place at that meeting. There was an action that couldn't be changed. I'll let you do it however you want, I guess, as long as, the best way to do this, Michael, would be to ask the board what they want to do here, and then the board goes ahead with it.
Procedurally, Robert's rules outline how we do it.
I agree.
So I'm going to go back to, we're going to have a motion to rescind, excuse me, a motion to reconsider.
Right.
If that passes, we will have a motion to rescind, which will require 2/3 vote to remove it. It's, the rules are the rules. Nick.
However you do it, I would like to have these done separately if possible.
They are
Oh,
separate.
They are
And,
separate.
and I would like to have a recorded roll call, a detailed roll call.
So if the minutes can reflect everyone's vote. Okay, so the first motion is a motion to reconsider Article 7. Been moved and seconded. Jane?
Phyllis,
Yes.
Winston,
Yes.
Karen,
Yes.
Jim,
Yes.
Nick,
No.
Cheryl,
Yes.
Michael,
Yeah.
Bob,
No.
Betty,
No.
Scott,
Yes.
Lisa.
Yes.
8.301 yes, 2.456 no, 2.243 absent, motion passes.
Okay. Now there is a motion to rescind from the Finance Committee. Is that correct?
No,
Well, that's,
there's no motion to rescind. There was a motion to reconsider. We've
Reconsider.
now taken a look at reconsidering it.
would anyone like to make a motion to rescind the vote on Article 7, which will remove it from the draft warrant articles?
I'll make that motion.
So it's been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion that we haven't already had? Yeah, Nick?
Yeah, I would like to, if another board member could help me, possibly, give me an explanation of why we should not allow the public to weigh in on this. Thank you.
I would
Mary?
like to say, I feel like we still don't know the whole financial impact, and I'm concerned about that.
So I guess that's where I'm confused, because we know that, as I said earlier, these costs, these additional logistics costs exist today. They're not tied in with
But
this.
they're not costing us today. They may exist in theory, but it hasn't happened to
So
date.
by giving children
Let's
that.
refrain from the
Okay.
discussion back and forth. If you want to say your salient point, please do so, but let's do it in organized manner. Nick?
So I'm concerned here that the reason that some board members are considering doing this is to not allow those logistics costs to come into view at the cost of students. So if you have students that can't afford lunch or don't have a parent that's willing to pay for lunch, or breakfast, I'm sorry, don't have the ability, or a parent that doesn't pay attention enough, to fund their student to have breakfast. We're going to allow those children not to have breakfast because we don't want to see logistics issues arise. I think that's a serious issue.
Jim, and then Wynn?
Yeah, I think in this case, kind of respectfully disagree. I don't see that there's a problem with rescinding this, at least at this time. And I think your question was appropriate in asking why we should do it at this time. Because, and the answer to that, in my mind, may be different from other people, but my understanding of the situation as it was presented to us at Finance was that the administration was not recommending either one of these for basically two fundamental reasons. Number one was there wasn't an accurate amount as to what the cost would be. And I think second of all, that there was a logistics problem, both of which still currently exist. That doesn't mean that this couldn't be put on later if we got more accurate numbers, or if the administration and/or all the teachers and principals who were involved and came before us felt that it was able to be done logistically and do it in a timely fashion, then I would be in favor of doing it. But right now, with what we were presented there by the time by the administration, I don't think we can support it.
Wynn?
In some of the comments made that the children wouldn't be fed, and that is not true. We have a lunch policy in place now to take care of this through the lunch program, and no one is ever denied a breakfast that I have ever heard of going through Monadnock schools, or a lunch for that matter. They may be different circumstances, but we have a plan in place for people that can't pay. We have a government program that they can sign up for, and some do, some don't. But this needs some work, and I would like to see it worked on to get some better numbers, and we can still put it back on the warrant. Or we can leave it there and change the number later on.
Correct. Any further additional discussion?
I'd just like to see just to be clear, that to have a detailed roll call vote for this second vote as well.
If the minutes can reflect the roll call vote. Jane?
Phyllis?
Yes.
Winston?
Yes.
Karen?
Pass.
Oops, sorry, hon. Jim?
Yes.
Nick?
No.
Cheryl?
Yes.
Michael?
Yeah.
Eric?
Abstain.
Bob?
No.
Betty?
No.
Scott?
No.
Lisa?
Yes.
Karen?
No.
Still on.
6.546 yes, 4.212 no, 1.121 abstain, 1.121 absent. Your total is 58.38%.
So it did not pass. So the warrant will remain on as written. So next is Article 8. Is there a motion to reconsider Article 8?
Yeah, same motion.
Okay.
I'll second that.
It's been moved and seconded. Any additional conversation with regard to Article 8? Again, this is to reconsider, and then we'll go through the same process of rescinding if we wish. Karen?
I would feel more comfortable if I recuse myself from the second vote.
Okay. Betty?
I'm in favor of this one as well. I don't think just because the kids are older makes them any less hungry in the morning. And so I think we should pass this one as well.
Okay. Anyone else? Nick?
I feel the same as Betty. But I think the most important thing, I'm primarily concerned about 7, about the young children, for everything we've talked about for the past couple of years. But for 8, I would like the public to be able to make that decision. We bring these articles forward and allow the public to make that decision.
Okay. Anything further? Again, this is a motion to,
Quickly, I guess, from the standpoint of what we got from the administration, is this number, the 76,587, is that an accurate number?
No.
So that's the number that's in this warrant article. So I think that's imperative in the discussion, that we already know, and I'd like it on the record, that it's been pointed out from the administration that that's not an accurate number, so that should this one be in the same situation, I think we're gonna have to come back and review the number.
Nick?
I would ask the same exact question of administration, with one slight modification. Is this an accurate number purely concerning providing the food to the students?
Purely concerning the food,
Yes,
not provision of the food.
thank you.
Anything further from anyone? So, seeing none. Jane?
Phyllis?
Yes.
Winston?
Yes.
Karen?
I'm recused.
Oh, I'm sorry, hon. Jim?
Yes.
Nick?
No.
Cheryl?
Yes.
Michael?
Yep.
Eric?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Betty?
No.
Scott?
Yes.
Lisa?
Yes.
She said yes.
She said yes.
Oh, I'm
I
sorry.
coughed over it.
I'm sorry. 9.787 yes, 1.335 no, 1.121 absent, and 0.757 recused.
Okay. So the motion to reconsider has passed. Is there a motion to rescind?
So moved.
It's been moved. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? We know everyone's opinion.
Yeah, detailed roll call vote, just to be clear.
If the minutes can reflect the roll call vote, Laura? Anything further that anyone wants to add? Okay, Jane?
Phyllis?
Yes.
Winston?
Yes.
Karen?
Recused.
Recuse. Jim?
Yes.
Nick?
No.
Cheryl?
Yes.
Michael?
Yeah.
Eric?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Betty?
No.
Scott?
Yes.
Lisa?
Yes.
9.787 yes, 1.335 no, 1.121 absent, 0.757 recused, and your vote total is a majority.
Okay, so Article 8 will be stricken from the proposed warrant articles. Okay. That was good use of our time. Moving on, there is a motion from the STEAM Ad Hoc Committee. You all should have in your packet the draft definition of STEAM. So I would be looking for a motion to approve the definition as presented from the STEAM Ad Hoc Committee.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Nick?
Just because it's the first time I've seen this. It looks like in the middle of the body on the first page, we have the MRSD mission and vision statement. This is something that was developed by, kind of spearheaded by Lisa, correct?
Correct.
And you just have it there in order to,
The context.
okay. And the other thing I'm concerned about is we have, there isn't a lot of like concrete stuff in there. A lot of it is, except for the last two bulleted items on the second page. When I was reading it, a lot of it is kind of qualitative, I guess you'd say. There isn't a lot in there that says these are the things that we're going to do in order to make this happen. It's more of it's highly generalized, and I'm afraid that a lot of these things are going to be lost when it actually comes to putting them into action, because there isn't a lot of action items within that.
Anything further, Jim?
Yeah, I have to agree with Nick. I read this, and it's extremely wordy, first of all, and there's a lot of, for better word, maybe gobbledygook in here. And the one thing which we've done these type of things for a long time, we're asking for definitions, and we've tried to do this, I think, particularly with all the committees recently. But I've been after since day one, both on the definition for what we were trying to do on vision statements for the board as well. And I've been unsuccessful on all of those so far, so I might as well be unsuccessful on this one too. But the point is that most of this is unmeasurable. And I think it's long past time that this board and the committees started to put these statements in something that was measurable, so that at the end of the period of time, educationally, everybody that deals with education knows that we're after measurable results. And so if what we've got here is a statement that is vague in general and not measurable, I can't vote for it.
Anyone else? I would add that the definition of STEAM is the definition of STEAM. It's what it is for the district. It's what it is for the world. And what what this motion does is to define it, and that the first sentence in the philosophy statement is exactly what it should be, is that STEAM is not a specific program, it's a philosophy. It isn't necessarily measurable as 2 plus 2, you got it correct. It's a philosophy of enriching the educational process through science, technology, the arts, math, etc. So I just share that with the group. Nick and then Betty.
I want to be clear that there is a lot that I like in it. But my concern is that when you define, when you make this definition, and then you have this practical statement towards the end, I think the practical portion of it's very important, and to make sure that it's something that actually that comes from it. That this isn't just words. So when we say that we want to enrich our classrooms with math and art and science and technology and engineering, I think a lot of the teachers probably do that already, or would say that they do it, or administration would say that we do that already. I think the important part of it is how do we define that as a board and say this is actually what's going to happen. We're going to make sure that these things are incorporated, and I think there's a good start to that in the last paragraph. But I would like to see more so that it's more clear cut.
And then Bob.
I think the reason for developing this was to have the board endorse the concept. We'd like to spread it throughout the district. The administration has had a core of teachers trained over the summer. It is an initiative, but it doesn't have any board support, at least officially at this time. Over time, this may prove to be too loose, and we may need to tighten it up. It's not cast in stone except for right at this minute, but we can amend it as time goes on. I think we were trying to leave enough space for the buildings to implement it without having to be in lockstep. And anyone else on the committee, speak up if you've got something else that...
Bob and then Scott.
I agree with Betty, but I agree with some of the others that, this could be a better product. It could have more detail. However, I think it's an adequate start. STEAM is a philosophy or a paradigm of learning that emphasizes multidisciplinary approaches and a hands-on approach to learning. And we're doing it in Gilsum now. I think this is adequate to get us underway.
Scott.
So part of the purpose of this, speaking as a committee member, the full board passed a motion back in June of 2015 to deploy STEAM in all the other schools. And as the administration works to define a plan for that, what we didn't want to have happen was to have a plan with the type of detail you might be thinking of to come forward and have different board members look at that plan and go, well, that's not what I think STEAM is. We're trying to get to a foundational definition of what STEAM means to the district. When people say good things are happening at Gilsum, what does that mean? Well, this is that core philosophy statement. It's meant to be qualitative so that when we get to a quantitative plan, we all have an understanding and agreement of where it's coming from, and it doesn't look like it's coming out of left field. So I know that plan is under construction. We've seen some details of that. I think by approving this as a full board, if we agree with the definition of what STEAM means in the classroom, then we're, in a sense, green lighting the administration to take the next steps to define that more detailed plan.
Anyone further? Yeah, Win?
Yeah, I have not much of, I don't have a problem with this paper. What I have concern is the statement we just heard that was to be put into all the schools. Yeah, but I don't think that was the correct way it was meant to be. It would be offered to all our schools to implement one if they so desired. Some schools may not want that type of program, and so they may not have a STEAM program. Otherwise, we're going to have every school doing STEAM, and what about the other side of the ones that do not take part in STEAM? But I think this is a good start. The committee has got some definite hands-on reading to do. Parents have a way to look to see what we're trying to provide and build. And the next part that you just mentioned that is coming, we'll have to wait to see how that comes out and vote on it at that time. But I can support this.
Okay. Anyone further? Okay. Jane?
I'm going to have to just do it as a call vote, Mike, because my system just went blank.
Oh, lovely.
Okay, so I'll just go around the room if that's easiest.
That's fine.
Phyllis?
Yes.
Jim?
No.
Eric?
Yes.
Winston?
Yes.
Karen?
Yes.
Nick?
Yes.
Lisa?
Yes.
Mike?
Yeah.
Bob?
Yes.
Scott?
Yes.
Betty?
Yes.
Cheryl?
Yes.
It passes, there's only one negative.
I wasn't sure how it was going to fly out, so I wanted to do the roll call vote.
there you go.
Okay, so I believe that is all the motions from the committees at this time.
No.
That's all I had on my agenda.
Another,
Okay.
we had finance had a meeting last night, and there was a motion made to be brought before the board based on about 2.5 hours or plus of discussion of the three-tiered situation. So I would like to propose that be dealt with here. And I realize it's not on the agenda, so it's going to require a 2/3 vote. But I would also say that that was the information that we received, and that was the earliest that the information was received. And the committee spent quite a large amount of time, and not just the committee, but there were other board members that were present. So I would, I think, respectfully request that at least the motion be brought forth for discussion.
Okay, so there would be required of a motion to amend the agenda to take an item that we didn't draft on the agenda, so that would be the first action, and then we would take up the actual motion. So anyone want to make a motion to amend the agenda?
Yes.
It's been moved.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded, discussion to amend. Yeah, Nick?
Yeah, but this is on documents that I haven't even received yet.
Yeah, me
So
too.
we're going to be asked to vote on cutting, from my understanding, from just what I've been shown 5 minutes before the meeting, more than $1 million without even seeing any documents on it. That's insane.
And don't have it added to the agenda. Okay, Sherry?
My concern about adding it to the agenda, not that I don't think it's an important and urgent item, but this is also an item that the public may want to weigh in on, and by not having it on the published agenda, there was no opportunity for anyone else to do that.
Committees.
Okay, Lisa?
My hope is that by beginning the discussion tonight, we will get the documents into the hands of all of the board members sooner, and we can get them out to the public sooner. wouldn't want to get the documents out there without at least having them presented in some preliminary way first. I don't foresee us taking any sort of vote on it tonight. This is on, I would hope that we talk about it tonight so we can just get the information into everyone's hands.
Again, this is a motion to add it to the agenda, I hear what everyone's saying, and I was at that long meeting last evening. I think it's appropriate for us to start this conversation this evening, but I'm only one. Betty?
Do we know what the motion is?
It's a motion to add discussion with regard to the budget proposal that was presented and moved by the Finance Committee last evening.
As directed
Right.
by the board.
I would like to, I think the board needs to consider the information that we were given last night. I don't know that we necessarily have to take an action tonight, but I think it's imperative that this board, this is December, and we're into the budget at this point pretty big time. We received that information at the Finance Committee last night. That meeting had been scheduled, and that we have another meeting scheduled for the following week. And I think what needs the board here as a whole, we were given a pretty comprehensive package, and I'm sorry that the board doesn't all have it tonight, but this is basically what we were given last night. And this was, again, in response to a request by this board that the Finance Committee review at least 3 different levels. And what we were given last night and presented with from the administration was at least 3 different levels with 3 different variations. I think it would be very helpful to the board, to the full board, if you're going to start to discuss the budget. We don't have a lot of time to be putting it off to another meeting.
So, in thinking of this, this isn't a matter that requires board action. This is a matter of information and discussion. So there is an agenda item that is committee reports, and I believe that's where this would fit. This is a report from the Finance and Facilities Committee. We can present the information to the other board members. You can give a synopsis of the 2.5-hour discussion. The board isn't, I don't believe the board would be, or the Finance and Facilities Committee is looking to have the board endorse any particular proposal at this time, but it's important that we get all the information. Am I correct in saying that?
Yeah, that's it in a nutshell.
So if that's the case, then I would rule that the motion to amend the agenda is, I'll say, out of order, even though it's technically not. But we'll remove that motion and we'll take up this matter under committee reports. And that way we can be presented with the information. Lisa and then Nick.
But it is on the agenda under superintendent's report and district budget, and I suspect we would have received some sort of presentation there anyway.
That's correct. And we're going to hear it in other places too. Yeah.
I'm absolutely fine with receiving the information, but the way that it was presented was as though we were going to see a motion from the Finance Committee on this tonight without having seen any documents. So that's fine to be presented with the information.
Bob?
I'm making a habit of agreeing with Nick tonight, but I really do agree. I don't think any motion is appropriate tonight. I'm open to presentation, but I was unable to attend the meeting last night, and I'm not prepared to vote on any motions until I've looked at the numbers.
So with that, we're in a position where we have a number of agenda items that will be around this item. If after your report from Finance and Facilities, if the board wishes to modify the agenda at that time in order to make a motion, I think that would be appropriate. because there is a lot of information, but I don't know how we will move forward. So I think it's appropriate to move along in the agenda, and then if we need to modify the agenda at that time, we can do so. Okay? All right. So I don't believe we have any other committees that have motions. So we'll move on to 3 matters for information and discussion. The first order of business is our student representative report. Mr. Blair.
Hello, everyone. In some cheery news, we have some very exciting things going on, both presently and in the future, around the district as we move into the holiday winter season. So a few weeks prior, we had our NHS, the National Honor Society, induction at the high school, so just welcoming new members into that organization, service-based, also honor-based, but just exciting to be able to recognize students for their, I guess, outstanding character. We also have our winter sports that have started, so I don't know that I know them all off the top of my head, but definitely great to see that going. On that note, we do have our pep rally that we have been planning. Our Spirit Week, which will be next week, is Christmas Gear Monday, Twin Day Tuesday, Superhero versus Supervillain Wednesday, Blackout Thursday, and Green and White Friday. So something new that we're sort of doing for our pep rallies is we have this kind of spirit competition where students in groups of 5 and each of the faculty departments here at the high school are able to dress up and show support for whatever the Spirit Day theme is, and then we have a group of students and a group of faculty who will be sort of judging each of the teams on how spiritful they are, and then at our pep rally, whoever is sort of has the most spirit will have a chance to participate in the pep rally, playing some games, and students will be able to receive our Husky Pride tickets. Quick note for people who don't know what our Husky Pride tickets are. Basically, students who do good things around the community, get good grades, whatever, at the end of the quarter, usually you can go in and say, hey, like, this is what I'm involved in, these are my grades this quarter, and you can receive Husky Pride tickets. And at the end of the year, there are opportunities for students to receive prizes. There's a driver prize of a car every year where students get an opportunity to test their key and see if they won the car, and then the non-driver opportunities is a bunch of great prizes with electronics and wonderful school supply stuff. So that's what we have going on for our pep rally. Coming up, we have our holiday show. You might have seen around the school some of the students getting ready for that, but that is coming up this weekend. This week, we also have some students from our elementary schools viewing that. So that's exciting, just to get them the opportunity to get out of their school and go see some performances. Moving on to specific, elementary school things. Mount Caesar, they are providing Christmas for more than 50 children around the community through Toys for Tots. And as I mentioned, K through second grade are seeing the MRHS Holiday Show on the 13th. At the Gilsum STEAM Academy, they've started their second trimester, which is themed inventions. Recently, 5 students, Mackenzie Franklin, Gwen Britt, Andrew, Parento, maybe? Landon Wilkes and Caden Russell, along with Mrs. Noel and Ms. Wiley and Mr. Rathbun, attended the Krista McAuliffe Technology Conference Student STEAM Showcase. So students were able to bring back several ideas which they're hoping to be able to implement with other students and complete some wonderful projects in their classrooms. They're also conducting a food drive and working with local businesses and families to help give people in need just an opportunity to have something that they wouldn't necessarily be able to during the holiday season. And they have a partnership with the River Valley Community College, which has enabled them access to use a 3D printer on loan, but it's a great thing. They can definitely explore a lot with just development and creation of different designs that the students will be able to use. At Cutler, students 5th through 6th will be seeing the holiday show tomorrow during the day, and they also had a successful food drive with Gert's Pantry last month. On December 19th, the 6th grade will be performing their holiday show, just for the community and the public, for everyone who wants to, anyone who would like to see that. At the Troy and Emerson School, they are performing their holiday shows on Wednesday, December 14th and Monday, December 12th, respectively. And they've also been reaching out to local community business owners and students to sort of assist families in need. They also had some very successful student-led conferences where students were articulate and professional as they presented their progress to their parents and teachers alike. So, just a side note, sorry, I'm bad at speaking today. I think it's really great to just see all of these communities and these schools coming together in their own ways to support families in need that don't have the same opportunities as everyone, and just providing in that sort of giving spirit for everybody during the holiday season. That concludes my report for this evening. If anyone has any questions, be sure to let me know. Thank you.
Thank you.
Does anyone have anything for Tyler?
And sorry that was so lengthy.
You don't get your brevity from me. So, thank you for that. Moving on, superintendent's report.
A few items in addition to what, just the informational items and one additional action item. First and foremost, the new website is live. It went live on Monday, and we're working through all of the issues. So please appreciate your patience. If you encounter difficulty, please let us know. And as a result of that, I don't have the copies of your usual fundraising calendar. Lillian has been very involved with the website, getting it up and running, and so that has taken a front seat to some other things. So I apologize, I don't have an updated fundraiser list for you tonight. I do require board action. I have a $1,000 donation for STEM materials from Summit Distributing for the middle high school. And Summit Distributing it's the, let me just read this part of the letter, it's easier. ExxonMobil is committed to supporting math and science in our schools. To date, your local ExxonMobil station, West Street Neighbors in Swansea, nominated Monadnock Regional Middle High School for an ExxonMobil educational grant, and we are pleased to submit to you a grant in the amount of $1,000. And so since this is $1,000 or more, it does require board action to accept.
Make a motion to accept that generous donation.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
A couple other announcements. We have a student from the high school by the name of Anthony LaFont who auditioned for the All-State Music Festival in percussion and was accepted to both the orchestra and chamber music festivals, which is apparently a really a great honor. So congratulations to Anthony. And we were also notified this week by the New Hampshire Football's Officials Association that the Monadnock Huskies have won the Division III Sportsmanship Award. And so we'll be receiving a banner for our gym in reflection of this accomplishment. So congratulations to the team. And I think I mentioned maybe at one, maybe two board meetings or at some of our meetings that I've received communications from other districts complimenting us on just on our football team, from other superintendents, and including Stevens, who we lost to at a regional superintendents meeting. The superintendent made it a point to say that it was a fantastic game, and a difficult one to lose, but that the kids were fantastic. So that's awesome. Congratulations. From the agenda, I was asked to provide an update on the MDEA insurance funds. And so, as you know, we did go to arbitration on this issue. The arbitration hearing was held on November 3rd. The final brief submission from both the attorneys representing each side are due December 14th. And after that, each party has through the end of this year, so December 31st, to file any response briefs. Timeline for the decision from the hearing officer, anywhere between 30 and 45 days after the last filing. So if you look at the last filing date is December 31st, looking at the end of January, early February for a decision date or a decision to be rendered. And once we learn of that decision, we'll need to address that decision with the board, and the board will need to decide what action or response it wishes to take as a result of that. So that is what I have for the insurance MDEA information. Also on the agenda is the district budget, and I would ask, I would refer back to our chair of the Finance and Facilities Committee, if you would like me to jump into this now, or do we want to take it up under committee information? Can do either. I have it on the agenda. We can do it now, but I'll defer to you.
It might make sense to get through all of the logistics and then circle back so that we can focus on that, if you're okay with that.
Sure. Okay. All right, I'm going to send around two packets of information. One is in color and on smaller sheets. And the other is bigger, and it was supposed to be in color, and it's in black and white, but it helps distinguish between the two. So my recommendation right now is don't delve into the black and white one yet. Let's just look at the one, the smaller version in color.
Do you want to go through this discussion after we get through everything, or do you want to?
I think I can do sort of a real quick overview of the documents that you've received, and then
we can tackle it.
Circle back to the committee.
Okay.
So last night, as Jim had mentioned, we did share with the committee a number of versions of different layers of reductions to the proposed preliminary budget. As the board had directed myself and the administrative team, we were asked to make 3 levels of cuts, and as I mentioned at the board meeting, we would look to bring in at the first level a budget that was at or about default. Next level would be at or about halfway between default and a level funded budget, and then the third level would be a level funded budget. In addition, I forget if it was before or after the last board meeting at this point, but the budget committee had also expressed an interest in looking at what a 10% reduction off of current, a level funded budget would look like. And so last night, that was part of what we shared with the Finance Committee as well. So the bigger packet, don't look at it yet, but I'll just tell you what's in there, are all of the versions that we brought last night. So we brought version A, which had 3 worksheets. Each worksheet was a level. So default, halfway, and then level funded. Version B has 3 worksheets, same thing, first one at default, then halfway between, and then a level funded. And then the third worksheet, or the third version, only has 2 worksheets. One was a 4.5% reduction off of a level funded budget, and the second was a 10%. So as Jim mentioned, there was a very good discussion that lasted about 2.5 hours last night, and in the end, the Finance Committee did identify one of those worksheets to bring forward for a more in-depth discussion, and that's what's on the little pieces of paper that's in color. So it's called version A, worksheet 3. You also realized last night that my identification or numeration scheme was not the best, so I apologize for that. If you're looking in the big packet, it's page 3. You'll notice I hand corrected because I think it's an error, but you have it in front of you. So at this point, I just want to get the information out to you, and I'm not sure, if we can delve into more of the details when we get to the Finance Committee, but what I'll tell you is what you see on the worksheet. The top section that is in both white and blue, those are the elements from the preliminary proposed budget that we talked about at the Saturday meeting. Okay, so over on the right-hand side in the blue are the cost items, or in the blue are what we were proposing to remove from what we put out there as a proposal in addition to what we, our current operating budget. The blue section underneath is reductions from where we currently are. And then the bottom just shows you the impact, all right? And then the other pages that go along with this just detail what all of these other pieces of paper are. Anything that's highlighted in red relates to the one on top.
I know we're going to have probably a lot of discussion about this under the committee reports. I saw your hand. Is it?
Just one quick question. Can you tell us how this ties into, you had did some restructuring with these resource rooms? And where we were shifting some pairs out and bringing additional teachers in to not only to save costs, but to provide better services for those students. How does that tie into this, and is that completely structured?
It's part of this year's budget, so we've done that for this year, so that's part of your default budget.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
I would like to publicly thank Lisa and everybody else for doing this. That was a very emotional meeting. I don't think anybody enjoys doing that, but this is a lot of work, and there's only so many places that you can cut when you're dealing with a school budget. It's basically salaries and any new positions, anything like that. You're limited, but I do appreciate the work, and even this from yesterday for you to have ready today.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else for your report at this time?
I have nothing else. We will have the need for a non-public at the end as well.
Okay. Business administrator's report. Jane, do you have anything?
I've really just been keeping busy the last couple weeks. Our auditors are due here all next week, so don't bother me.
Okay. Okay. So that brings us to the board chair report. The first piece that I want to share with you is, if you remember a few meetings ago, the board instructed me to put a resolution into the School Board Association with regard to our IDEA monies. So that resolution went in. However, School Board Association chose to not take any action on it, as I have, and I'll make copies of this. I actually just got it in the mail today, but I can forward it out to everyone. It's the blanket statement that they've made to other districts in the past. And of course, I didn't earmark it. If I can find it quickly. I apologize, I should have earmarked this. But essentially that they said that the federal law, they're already working on trying to get this resolved, but they're not going to take a direct action on it. So let's see. I just found it.
Thank you.
Where does it say? IDEA requires the federal government to pay 40% of the average daily tuition for students meeting the conditions of services under IDEA. Since that time, the maximum reimbursement on average has been less than 40%, and in recent years averaged as little as 17%. Be it resolved that the members of the School Board Association enjoin in a class action suit against the federal government and its appropriate agencies, as well as the U.S. Congress, to require full reimbursement to all member SAUs for the entire shortfall of the reimbursement since the enactment of the IDEA. So that's the resolution that went in. And then I provided rationale with regard to that. Their response was adoption not recommended by the School Board Association Board of Directors, and they're given the language of the IDEA statute, the proposed legal action would likely not be successful. Both national and state advocacy efforts have focused on this issue for a long time, dating back to 1990, and despite long-standing efforts to increase the level of funding, neither political party has been willing to realistically address this issue. Past efforts included a proposal to increase the funding amount gradually over 10 years to reach full funding. Similar efforts to move the issue to mandatory funding within the federal budget have not been successful with either party. Both New Hampshire School Board Association, I don't know what the other one, National School Board Association and the New Hampshire School Board Association continue to annually advocate on behalf of this issue, but they did not adopt it. So that was the response that we received back, which is, I knew that that was going to be the case, but you know, we continue and should continue to address this. It's an issue. We've all talked about it. It's well underfunded. Maybe a new administration in the federal government will change that. I don't know. So I wanted to share that with the school board and our public, both present and in TV land. I want to talk about the budget process just in general, and I'm not going to get into the weeds of it. And I too want to publicly thank our administration, the entire administrative team. We put a lot of work in a very short amount of time. That is a very daunting task, and it will continue to be so as we work through the process. And I've made this comment publicly before, and I'll make it again. The unfortunate reality is that we're in a perfect storm. The adequacy aid funding from the state has gone down. The formula that we are using has changed. And the budget, while we have reduced it, is still where it is. So all of those factors, in addition to others, present us with the challenge that we're in today. And if you read the Monadnock Education Matters and my letter in that, I am hopeful that we can continue the positive feeling, and you know, Tyler said it from a student perspective, that the giving spirit, people in spite of difficult times are still out there giving. We have tough challenges in front of us. It's not just this year. And we've had these challenges for years. Past boards have tackled this. Past boards may not have addressed it head on. And we're trying our best to tackle it head on. These are difficult discussions, and it's not just putting a Band-Aid on this year and hoping it goes away next. We in this district need to be really cognizant of where we stand, how the budgets are, and how it impacts education for the future. You know, one of the things that I will say also, because it comes up, is, well, we can attract other districts. We can attract other towns. We have a fine educational system, and we have fabulous staff that provide a wonderful education. You know, I've had 4 kids that have gone through this district from the time that they were born until the present. I can testify to that. They've gotten into great colleges, and they have a great education, and I know many of their friends and colleagues that share the same sentiment. We have to be realistic from a business perspective. And I was thinking about this after the Finance and Facilities meeting last evening, that when we talk about per pupil cost, yes, it's a number that we need to talk about, and it gives us a barometer of where we stand. However, that per pupil cost is what our towns absorb. That is what we deal with in our communities. When we look to attract, say, Winchester or another town or another district to our school, I have been at the committee meetings where I've heard comments of, we have to charge them what we're paying. And I made the comment last evening. Other school districts don't charge what their per pupil costs are. That's the reality. Keene doesn't, Conval doesn't. So from a business perspective, because I am a business person as well, if you have a classroom that has a carrying capacity of 20, and we're only putting 15 students in that we still have the same cost per pupil, regardless of 15 kids in that classroom or 20. We have 5 empty seats. If we put 5 additional students in those seats, what is our cost? 0. But if we charge a community 10,000, 12,000, 13,000, whatever the number is, and is lower than our pupil per pupil cost per that town, over the years, people have gotten upset with that. We can't charge them less. You have lost revenue. It's the reality. You chose to not put people in those seats from a business perspective. They've gone to another district. We've lost that opportunity. So when we talk about thinking outside of the box and thinking about creative solutions, we have to be open to those conversations as well. That while we may be paying 16+ thousand per pupil, per student cost, we have lost opportunity. We have a fantastic educational system in Monadnock. Why can't we attract? We need to be realistic in attracting and not increasing our cost and increasing our revenue, and that's one way. We also have to be very cautious of our discussion with regard to class size. Class size, as we increase, we could be in a difficult position. We have older facilities that the physical space doesn't allow for more kids. It's the reality. You can say we're going to increase the class size by 3, 4, 5, but you can't put 23 kids in a classroom that physically can't fit. So that's something that we need to be really cautious about. We don't have facilities that just have infinite room. We have older buildings that have smaller classrooms. So when we talk about reconfiguration or anything, that's something that just to keep in the back of your minds. And as a former college professor, I can tell you there's a big difference between 18 students and 20 students or 22 students. It becomes a challenge. It's not unsurmountable, but it becomes a challenge. So I just want us to all think about that as we have these discussions with regard to the budget and with regard to our projecting and looking forward. I said this last night, and I'll say it again publicly in front of our public here and on TV. We are asking our administration to develop a 3 or 5 year plan in 2 weeks. It's unfair for them. It's unfair for our district. And I'm concerned that we may make decisions because we're coming up to a deadline that we should have done in the past. We can't change the past. But we need to be moving forward and looking forward, and with whatever we pass this year, we have to be looking for the future, 3, 5, 10 years out, and really working through our strategic plan and building a plan that makes sense for the Monadnock Regional School District. And I hope we can get there. I said this last night, I was hoping we could start this conversation in a summer retreat with all of our communities and all of our committee members, board members, legislative people. It didn't happen. We are where we are. It's December 6th, and we'll move forward. So that is everything that I have to say with regard to that. I just paint it in a perspective and hope that we can move forward positively in all of these discussions. So moving on to committee reports. I know we'll circle back to Finance and Facility. Are there other committees that wish to make a brief report before we go into the Finance and Facilities? I had on the agenda STEAM, but we tackled it under the motion. Did you have anything to add to that?
Well, CRC met tonight, and
Yep.
don't mind, is it all right if I, okay. And we were talking about how to put the upcoming teacher's contract, the warrant articles, and the proposed budget in front of the community. And so we have a couple motions because we'd like to be empowered by the board to do that work. I'll do the first motion. That's
Well, we're going to include the motions on the next agenda, but you can certainly let people know that we're going to, because we can't take action unless we modify the agenda by 2/3.
Oh, all right.
You can
Okay.
inform people, but
I'll
we'll
inform
actually,
you of what the motions are
but we're
going to
going
be.
to put them on the next agenda.
There's going to be a motion to empower the CRC to develop warrants in plain language or plain English, and plus the teacher contract and the proposed budget, and bring it to the board for the January meeting. And then as far as the warrant, any revisions, if necessary, could be made after the deliberative, if the deliberative changes some of the warrant. So at the next, the meeting in January, we would be wanting to get permission to do that work.
And in addition, we talked about authorizing the superintendent, chair, and vice chair of the board to develop talking points for public presentation of factual information concerning the budget and teacher's contract.
So those will be two motions that go on a future agenda for us to discuss. Anything else from CRC?
No, not unless.
Anything? Any other committees?
Just really short, Education Committee met this past Tuesday. The committee had indicated early on that they wanted an opportunity to ask some questions of our new Director of Student Services. So we focused on that. The next session will be, I think it's the 13th, next Tuesday.
Yes.
13th. And we're going to be discussing student retention. So that's, from what I understand, that's always been a good discussion. So
That's true.
come on, come all.
When?
Tomorrow night, there's a meeting at Keene High School on special education law, and I will be attending that committee,
Oh, great.
that unit, because it's a very important issue for us in this district. And what I heard from that special ed group we had the other night, to know more about the laws.
Thank you. Are there any other board members? Are you attending as well?
So I attended the last one that was up in Concord, and it was really good. And I came back with some good material, so I recommend it.
Unfortunately, I'll be out of town on business, so I can't attend, but certainly welcome any other board member to attend. It's at the Keene High School,
6 o'clock.
6 o'clock. Thank you. Betty?
Whereabouts at the high school?
I'm going in the front door.
Oh, so okay. So I didn't know if it's a large group
I haven't a
instruction or where it
clue.
was.
And it was
Okay.
not in the notice or anything, so I assume there'll be someone there
They'll
directing us.
Okay.
So 6 o'clock, any board members as well as the public are welcome to attend that session. And as Lisa indicated, it was a good informational session, and I'm sorry I have to miss it. Any other committees that have met that wish to make a report? I didn't think there was any, or were any. Okay. So finance and facilities. Jim?
Okay, I don't want to go over too much of what's already been discussed, because there's enough there. I do want to state that I think the Finance Committee did an excellent job when you consider the amount of time of what we were given, which was basically last night. That was the first presentation that we've had seriously of any of the cuts or the proposed cuts to the budget. The budget has been presented before, and it has been presented to the Budget Committee. And the Budget Committee took a serious look at it and proposed some, I think, rather serious cuts. My comments to this, slightly different than Mike's, but along a lot of the same lines, was, and I've said it here publicly any number of times, that I think it's important that the school board take a serious look at the budget and try to deal with the budget more with a scalpel than with an axe. And I'm very concerned that if we're not careful from the standpoint of responsibility of what we're recommending for cuts, that we'll get some very serious cuts that are much more detrimental to the district. So I think that to present it the way it was presented to us, does everybody have one of the big ones at this point? Basically, to try to simplify it, we were given 3 different versions. There's a version A, a version B, and a version C. Originally, I thought when I first looked at it, we'd have 3 worksheets with each one, but that's not quite the case because we have 3, 3, and 2. So with version A, you have 3 worksheets. With version B, you have 3 worksheets. And with version C, you've got 2 worksheets. And I think to kind of summarize it briefly, there's a certain amount of numbers on each one of them. Version A and version B, in a lot of cases, are rather similar in terms of number, but not necessarily in terms of where the cuts are proposed. So to run it down from the least expensive to the most expensive in terms of cuts, if you look at the bottom corner on each one of these, on the right-hand number is in the dark red. On our versions, I hope everybody has the same one, but for example, on the first one, the bottom line reduction would be the 606,500. On worksheet 2 would be 1,066,500, 1,066,000, and then worksheet C is 1,546,000. Then when you go to version B, you're going to have 3 proposed versions. Again, the similar numbers, 606,500 for worksheet A, worksheet B at 1,546,000, and then version C, I missed that one. Well, version B was 1,066,500, and version C, worksheet C, was 1,546,000. And then the last 2, which is the really heavy reductions. The first one was worksheet A at 2,908,000, and worksheet B at 4,641,500. We went through each one of these worksheets, I think, except maybe not in a lot of detail. I'll try to make it correct, but not a lot of detail on the last one. I think it got to the point from the administration standpoint that I think that the proposal on worksheet B on version C is so hefty that there's, I think there were some real questions from their standpoint. I think when I'm finished there, if there's any corrections or anything you want to say, I'd appreciate it. But
You're doing a great job.
I just think that in the discussion that took place, and I think it's important to try to summarize it, and that's not going to be easy after the time that was spent there last night. As Jane mentioned, there was a couple discussions, and I'll take the responsibility for talking about the politics. There are a number of cuts here that are proposals from the administration, and the administration, as I said, took a look at it strictly from, or not strictly, but primarily from an educational standpoint. But there are a number of cuts in some of the other proposals that are rather political within this district. And so when we get into discussions of those items, that was, I think, where some of it was rather heated, particularly with regards to some of the proposals which start, I think, on, I guess it's version B with A, which is where we start to see, for example, it's called a consolidation, but it's a consolidation at Gilsum. And then there's the combination, and also reconfiguration for both Emerson and Troy. The same thing from there on down. It involves some reorganizations of those schools and/or consolidation or ultimately closing. And there is part of the discussion the other night that took place. It's important is the ramifications of what happens to this district if we close a school. And as I made the statement, and that it is political, and I think it's important. We have lost, in my time on this board, both Surrey and Sullivan. And I think personally that had those schools remained in this district, we would have been able to cope a little better with the situation. As Mike said just earlier, it's a matter of numbers. But those numbers have gone, and it's forced us to look more seriously at a couple of areas, particularly up north. So in our taking a look at all of these, I think one of the proposals that came out early was that we accept version, let's see if I've got it right, version B, worksheet B on version A, which was would have amounted to a $1,066,000 cut. And after a bit of discussion on that position, I think the committee felt that that was not enough of a cut. At least not the kind of cut that is necessary to try to get the budget committee to agree with where we as a board are. And so I think the end result of the end result of our discussions came up that we were most favored worksheet C, which was a proposed cut of $1,546,500. That's from the proposed budget. And so we're looking at that in the sense that that is fundamentally a level funded budget. And I think it takes into account some pretty serious cuts without necessarily closing schools that we feel we have some commitment to at this point. In the sense that it's not closing them. On the other hand, it does deal with, all the other items, and I think Lisa's done a good job in the sense that what you've got on the smaller page, the colored page that you've been given here, that was the choice of the Finance Committee, looking at what we were given last night. So personally, I would like to as well thank them for the amount of work that went into the alternatives. Nobody likes all the alternatives that necessarily were given. And I think there was some rather heated discussions about this. So with that, I think we would try to, at least from the standpoint of those of us that did, participate in this happy scenario, we could probably try to answer some questions or whatever, and at least for where our position was.
So before I open it up to questions, I want to...
Oh yeah, Wynn pointed out one thing that I think I should point out. On the side of the larger one, those numbers there are important if you want to look at them in terms of the quantity, where we have quantities on each one of these. There's, like on the front page, the quantity is 2 and 2 on the side. So I think everybody should understand we're talking there about, like on version A, worksheet A, they're talking about a reduction, proposed reduction of 2 certified people and 2 positions secondary. 2 at the elementary, 2 at the secondary. And you'll go down and each sheet has the proposed numbers for each one of those. So, for example, the one that we took a look at, which was on version A, the worksheet C, the quantities on the right side were 4, 5, and 6.
Okay.
Okay?
Prior to opening it up for comment, questions, et cetera, I want to add to Jim's report that there was a lot of discussion with regard to all of these worksheets, a lot of questions asked of the administration. And I think at the end of the day, what the Finance and Facilities Committee has truly charged through their, it's not necessarily support, but it's identifying that version A, worksheet C, is the starting point or the level that we wish the administration to work through, continue to work through. So by no means is this the final, I don't believe. It is certainly information for all board members to digest. Many of you are seeing this for the first time. And I would expect, because Finance and Facilities is going to meet again in, next week? Next week, that the administration will have a further refined version of version A, worksheet C, that hopefully is almost to the point that it's something that committee could bring forward as a motion to the full board to accept as a proposed budget. So understanding not all board members were at the meeting last evening, and there's a lot of information here. This is not completely cooked out, I would just say. So I think it's important, if you have questions specific to any of this, that we have that. But I also want to invite you to the next Finance and Facilities Committee, if you, that you can go through these details, because there will be a lot more discussion with regard to any of it, and we can further that conversation. Because certainly, I don't believe it's in anyone's best interest to spend another 2.5 hours fleshing out every single version of the 8 worksheets and the positives and negatives of each. With that said, there's also opportunity for questions if you have it now, and there will also be opportunity in the next Finance and Facility and the next board meeting to continue to have this discussion. So any specific questions? I say Betty, Lisa, and Nick.
Looking at worksheet C, what was the reasoning behind putting one elementary, one Cutler teacher, one Emerson teacher up above, and then 4 more down below? Because that's a little misleading. It's actually 6 elementary positions, not just 4.
The teachers that are listed at the top aren't existing positions. Those were the positions that we had put into the preliminary proposed budget that we anticipated needing.
Okay.
Under this model, we don't need those 2, plus we would reduce the additional ones below.
Okay.
Can you clarify that, your statement there? You say we don't need it, it would be we wouldn't get these 2. It's not that we don't need them.
Well, no, I mean, again, under the configuration that we've done.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you look at the, on this one, the class size is what that would be.
Yeah, and I think it's important for the public as well as the board members who were not at the last meeting to recognize that we were presented a proposed budget, right? So we were given a proposed budget. This is what the administration pulled together. All the administrative team pulled that together and said, this is what we would propose. There were additional positions, there were new positions, there were modifications, expansions of positions like athletic director, media information coordinator, et cetera, et cetera. So the areas on the top of these worksheets are where those are being eliminated from the proposed budget, and if there are additional items, those are listed underneath that. So those would be cuts in the existing budget versus what the proposed budget was, and we're just going to remove that. So I just want to be clear about what the budget looks like. Lisa, Nick, and then I'll go back to you, Betty.
So I just feel like it would be helpful to summarize the high-level changes of the proposal that the Facilities and Finance Committee is favoring the most. So I'm looking at this, and I see Troy and Emerson reconfiguration, so that means pre-K to second grade goes to Emerson School. Third grade through sixth grade goes to Troy School. And also increasing class sizes from 19 at the elementary level to 23. And 24 at the high school level to 28. I'm sorry, not high school level, but upper elementary. Right, upper elementary and high school. Also, it proposes reducing 15 teachers, taking away late buses entirely, and taking away $35,000 worth of extracurricular programs. I just think that to summarize in that way, it's helpful for those of us who are looking at this and we just see a whole bunch of numbers and we're not sure exactly what all of that is.
Nick?
Yeah, just a number of us are just seeing these numbers. So what I'm thinking of, what's going through my head is a rationale behind this. And you had spoke a little bit to the fact that we have less funding coming from the state level. So I try to put myself in that mentality and think about the limits of that thinking and carry that forward from year to year. We know that that funding is gonna continue to decrease. And I forget, Jane's not here, but the funding that's shrinking.
Adequacy.
The portion of adequacy that's carryover that shrinks. Jane knows the term. Anyways,
Blank stare.
So I try to think in terms of that. What with this sort of mentality and thinking of it in these terms, what does this sort of approach look like 10 years from now with the way that funding is going? What does our school system look like 10 years from now?
That's why we need a strategic plan to talk about all that.
Well, I think some of that is you can get a hint of just by looking at these sort of proposed actions, and it really comes down to, if we lose, say, 30% of our funding, say, what is that going to look like for our community and our children that are growing up? What other types of projects are more important than that within our towns? So I'm really concerned with. I think as Jim said, there's a lot of things we can tackle with a scalpel to be really efficient with. But when we talk about this gradual increasing of class sizes and reduction of a lot of other areas that people place a lot of value in our community, we need to be really careful. And I know administration has been careful in trying to minimize the damage and the impact to students, but I don't think there's anything on here with a couple very few exceptions that isn't going to have a significant impact on our students and our team that supplies them with the education that they receive. So.
Ready? Fine.
And just stabilization?
Yes.
Thank you. That was the term.
That was the word.
Yep.
Ready?
Lisa, are there any specifics as to where these 4, 5, and 6 positions? I mean, it just says elementary, secondary district.
We've discussed them, but we haven't come to consensus or agreement on exactly where those would fall at this point. When you look at the certified positions district, that's not necessarily folks who work at the district level. It may be someone at the secondary level, it may be someone at the elementary level, but because of the way certifications work, depending on what we look to reduce, it would impact. So we couldn't say it would definitely be elementary, or it would definitely be secondary. So those that we weren't sure, we put into a district pocket.
Okay, that's helpful.
Just to help, so we could keep track and try to be as specific as possible without getting too specific yet.
And what did you say it was going to do to class sizes at lower elementary and upper Oh, sorry, it's there.
They're at the top.
Okay.
23 and 28. And I will say that, we don't think that 28 is tenable.
23 kindergartners is.
I know. So we,
First graders.
during the day today, we started working on, taking this number and this scenario and coming up with other ways to get to the same place. So at finance next week, I expect to have a minimum of 3 other ways to get to the same place, but maybe more. We haven't sat down as a group to do that yet. We started some shared documents today and kind of traded electronic ideas. But we'll meet again tomorrow, and we'll meet again on Monday prior to finance to try to come up with just some different ways that we could get here. But, getting away from that 23 to 28 is a high priority because we don't view that is tenable.
Yeah, and I think that's important to reiterate that since Finance and Facilities met and came to some agreement as to a number, the administration has already started their process of looking at other creative solutions that may get to that number, that budgetary number that will have the least impact on kids, on our educational system, on our facilities while being fiscally responsible. And I applaud them. I know they're putting a lot of work into that, but that's where I say let's give them the space to go through that process. And I think I believe you're meeting on Tuesday.
Yeah, the 13th.
So meeting on Tuesday and having a further refinement of this, because this is not the finalized version, and continuing that conversation. Betty?
Just one more quick one. I think your comments earlier about the different physical sizes of some of our classrooms. An elementary classroom is supposed to be 900 square feet. A lot of ours are 800, some are 600.
Mm-hmm.
It's just yikes.
Yeah. Bob?
I've got a couple observations and maybe a significant question. I firmly believe that as a society and a district, we need to be investing in our youth and in our children for the future of our districts, our communities, and our nation. And we're getting a lot of blowback about the cost to other sectors of the community, the young versus the old. We're making some tough decisions, and I'm inclined to invest reasonably on behalf of students in the future. I've never been too concerned about the average cost of educating a student in this district. Because averages, when you go to a state average or this and compare this district to it, one has to say, why is this district different? I believe that this district is different because of economics and demographics. We're a poor district, and I know there's 2 sides to that coin. In raising taxes, we're poor, but also the volume of children, our students, on free and reduced lunch indicates that we have more children in poverty in our district than the state does. The average number for the state of New Hampshire, and you're going to hear me say this at every meeting going forward, is 29% on free and reduced lunch. It's the best of the 50 states in the United States. We have schools here that are hovering around 50%. That looks like inner city schools. So that is why, and students coming from poverty or low income require many more services, educationally and behaviorally. And when I look at this, and at the Education Committee, we discussed special ed, and I've been told that special ed is about 1/3 of our budget. It is. But it's always really hard to see it in here. You know, I can't get a pie chart. We can't get line numbers like what we have before us here. And I presume that special ed is off the table. And I believe we have higher costs of special ed because of our demographics. And there may be absolutely nothing we can do about that. But if we're taking the rest of the cuts that some of our communities are clamoring for, and I don't believe all of our communities are clamoring for it universally, although we all are suffering high tax increases, then I see this proposal as draconian. That's it.
Tyler and then Nick.
I guess I just had some questions about some of the items in specific. Firstly, the reduction in extracurricular programs, $35,000, just where that number, like what does that expense look like in broken down? Like what does that cost?
Yep. What we would look to do is look at what programs we have right now, whether they're athletic or otherwise, all extracurriculars, and identify those that have low participation rates. And then, try to build up to that $35,000 from the bottom up. So looking at those with the least participation or interest and go until we hit that threshold of 35,000. So I don't know I don't have a number or we haven't gotten to the point where we've sat down to see what those rates are and which programs would be impacted.
Would that exclude extracurricular programs even if they have low participation, if they have no cost to the school? Like there are certainly, at least in my understanding, clubs that just meet, and that's the only cost, I guess, is the time that they're in the building after school.
We'd be looking specifically at those that have a budgetary impact.
Okay.
You have a follow-up to a follow-up?
Well, no, it's sort of separate. And then I guess I was also just looking for the rationale behind the cutting the late buses. Just like what is that?
Utilization is quite low on the late buses, from what I am told, and again, in the interest of trying to keep some programs going, we would look to reduce that so that we wouldn't have to reduce something else in another part of the budget. But that was a recommendation that came from the middle high school.
Nick?
Yeah, I wanted to make another point as I look at this more. There's a lot of structural changes that we're looking to do here. And I'm not just talking about reducing staff or reducing programs, but we're talking about sending a whole bunch of kids from one town to another town that may not have otherwise have done that. You're talking about blending classrooms. And these are significant changes that will probably impact how our students, especially for that year, how those students are going to learn and handle those sorts of situations and how families are going to adapt to that. So that's a whole other facet to this that needs to be considered. And I think to tag on to what I was saying earlier, there's a lot of stuff in here that's that I think is quite important, especially the first item that you've noted as priority, that's important, that we almost need to have in order to be in compliance with the basic ability to provide education. I mean, and as we lose this funding over the next few years, however many years it goes into the future, I'm concerned that we're going to get into a cycle of hollowing out. And from what I understand, we've done that in the past.
Oh, yeah.
And it's resulted in increased costs for handling a lot of the situations that were generated from it. So I also feel that, again, I agree with Bob tonight.
It's an unusual night.
There's a lot of stuff in here that I think is, and it's nothing against administration, but as a board member, as a taxpayer, and as a father, that I feel is draconian as well.
Okay. I'm going to make a comment and then I'll take some other folks. I want to be clear to everyone, especially the public, that as we look at cuts, and as we have looked at cuts, the reality is that we've cut the budget, and cut the budget, and cut the budget, and cut the budget. Your taxes have gone up. We can propose to cut the budget even more significantly. Your taxes will still go up. That's an unfortunate reality, and I wish it wasn't the case. I wish it wasn't reality. But because of all of the reductions in state aid, the way schools are funded, federal funding, et cetera, we as taxpayers are taking the hit on that. And we can cut the school budget and cut it and cut it and cut it, and it will still go up. So I just share that because the public will see and have heard from various individuals in towns that the way to solve the tax increase is to cut the budget. It will only minimize it will only minimize the amount of effect in your taxes being raised. If you look at a town that has left the district, Sullivan, their taxes have increased significantly. And their costs to educate their children have also increased by bringing them to Keene. So the reality that our communities have to understand is, unfortunately, we have very minimal control over that effect. Certainly, our budget in the school district affects taxes in our communities, but it's not the single driving factor. So when you are considering and discussing the budget and going to deliberative and discussing the budget and going to vote in March on the budget, even if it was zero, I can't necessarily say that, but if it was very significantly lower, your taxes will still not be reduced in the fashion that we're all hoping for. And that's the hand that we are dealt in New Hampshire. They're not having these conversations in our neighboring states that have high and free and reduced lunch. They pay different taxes. So that, I just share that because I've heard it from a number of selectmen as well as people in the public in the communities saying the only reason why my taxes went up is because of the school district. And that is not the case. So, other questions? We got Betty and then Jim.
3 or 4 years ago, we combined with Keene to do the NASDAQ report. One of the biggest outcomes of that, in my reading of it, of what I saw, was that we've got too much real estate. If we're not trying to run as many school buildings, that will cut the budget. That was one of the things that came out of it. And I don't know that we ever fully explored if there are any savings that can be had if we go together with Keene on some of our expenses. There is an economy of number. And so I don't know if there's just two things that are out there that we never really addressed.
Yeah, I'll bring it to Lisa because I think she's going to respond to that, and then I'll get to you, Jim.
Actually, I had a meeting last week with the superintendent at Keene, in addition to other area superintendents, to talk about exactly that. Not necessarily the items that were bulleted in the NASDAQ report, but just to talk about ways that we feel we can work together to economize. And so we're in the starting stages of that, but it's not just with Keene, which is nice. It's with looking at some of our other contiguous districts as well. So you'll hear more about that. We've got another meeting scheduled for right after we come back in January. And we left the meeting the other day with a couple of ideas that we think we can, turn around quickly, sort of as pilots, to see how they go.
Good. Yeah, because I look at, not that I like it, but California, Texas, they have whole state adoption of programs. Now, that gives them a lot of clout as far as what programs get, and I'm not really, but I think there is some limited stuff that we might be able to get some savings.
Yeah.
Jim?
Yeah, I don't even want to comment on that last one, but
that's fine.
I think that I'm going to try to defend what we've done, because I think this is reality here. We may not like it. None of us particularly like it. I'm sure the administration and/or the people that put this together didn't like it. But the reality is that we got a budget that we have to propose to the cities and towns in this district coming up in March. And like it or lump it, I said this last night and I'll say it here, I think it's important that we do the things that are necessary to cut to get where we have to be. Because if we don't do it, I personally believe that what we're going to get on a pushback from the cities and towns, and it's stronger this year than it's been for years, what we're going to see is some cuts that the people sitting around this table can't even imagine. And if you want to take an example of that, maybe you want to look at the last page of what we were given with the 4.6 million, which is not too far from what the actual, one of the cuts, the proposed cuts was coming in from the Budget Committee. So I'm trying to say to the people here, I've said it before, and I think it's important to say it again. We have to be able to reach reality on what we're trying to present to the communities in this district.
That's 4.5, Jim? Not 6, right?
What's that?
4.5 million.
4.5, right?
Yeah, right. And I think that the problem has been, other years, we have made some serious cuts, and we have then been criticized for making those cuts. We were given a lot of additional data. It's not just these 4 pages, but we also were given information on the per pupil apportionment for state aid. We were given historical rates of increase of what's going on, comparison with several of the other towns and districts in the area. And one of the things that I thought was interesting on the historical rate of increase was Monadnock has not increased in the last, since about 2010, drastically in terms of their increase. You can look at that 2 ways, but the reality is that we have put some sort of a hold on the cost in relationship to a number of the other school districts. I think 10 years ago I sat here and Timmy Aho said exactly the same thing. He said, if we kept our per pupil cost, which at the time was one of the highest in the state, if we kept it at exactly where we are now, 5 years from now, we'll be in great shape because everybody else will be so high, they'll have long gone past us. Well, the reality here is we have done some things. Nobody has been saying that they were great, and that hasn't maybe been as educationally sound as it should have been. Everybody will agree to that. But you have to face, too, that when it comes down to people losing homes in a district, and that is what it is in this state. Now, I've dealt with it here on the Finance Committee, I think, for close to 30 years now, and I've seen it every year, and it's not got any better. I will agree, it's not got better. But we are faced every year with problems like this, and it's not going to get resolved right off under the current funding situation. So what we're faced with is try to be competitive with other school districts in the state. Mike made a comparison, I think it was Mike yesterday, made a comparison. Somebody talked about the state compared with other states. That's not what we're up against. I understand that's true. My wife taught for 37 years in Massachusetts. They fund differently. And so they have a whole different makeup on how they've got to come up with the funding. But this state, the way we fund, we put all the burden on the local communities. And then on top of that, we have a situation where we have not, since the day that I've been on this board, we have not got money back from the federal government that puts these big mandates through and refuses to fund particularly special ed. And special ed, I think in probably 25 years, has gone up almost every year. It's not that we don't want to spend money on special ed, but if the federal government's going to mandate it, they got an obligation to pay for it, or at least to help pay for it. But that isn't what happens here. It was brought up and it was discussed at the Budget Committee too, when people were talking about it's all getting pushed back on the local communities. We have such disparity on even the way we're funded within the district. And it's becoming so adverse here that I said yesterday, and I think it's important to say it to the whole board and to the public. We have got situations here right now. I'm not sure this district's going to be able to survive, because I think we've got some towns that are paying such a high proportion in relationship to others. So the best we can do, it was working within the situation, and some of you should try to imagine what the discussion was yesterday between all the different towns and the facts of maybe closing Gilsum, and a lot of discussion about closing Gilsum, and a lot of discussion about how it was arrived at, and also some proposals about consolidating both Emerson and Troy. Well, 2 meetings ago at the Finance Committee, I brought up the fact that we had some classrooms in Troy in the same grade that had approximately 13 students in those classes, and yet down in Fitzwilliam, we've got 26 to 27 in the same class, one class. That's an inequity that's not good to have in this kind of district. And so we have to do some sort of consolidations in some cases. But on the other hand, I have a real problem with the consideration, my personal opinion now, not the committee's, but I have a personal problem with trying to cut a school that is probably doing better than most of the other schools in the district. It's also a newer school. And so we need to look at, again, some of the political ramifications of what we're doing. And we have to consider, if we're going to consider thinking about closing a school in the district, I want to see the possibility considered of closing any school in the district. Not just say, well, we ought to close Gilsum, but let's talk about closing either Troy or Emerson or one of the schools in Swansea. Swansea's not adverse to being looked at and closed if they're not performing. If we're going to do this on a straight performance basis, we should be looking at all the alternatives. But we don't have enough time to do that right now. We got this presentation last night, and we've got a budget that's going to come up before the Budget Committee. And if you don't like what we've presented, then I would suggest take a serious look at the 4.6 or whatever it is billion proposed cut that you might be looking at. I think this is a lot better. I think we can stand behind it. I feel very confident with the board members that were there last night. All of us, including Mike, who Mike and I don't agree very often, agreed on this particular proposal probably as being one of the better proposals to come forth to the board. Now, it doesn't have to be specifically, as Mike said, every single item in here, but we do need to look at this as a serious number on a proposal.
Okay, before I recognize Nick, I did abstain from the vote last night, but I do think the number is something that we do need to truly look at, and also just wanting to allow our administration. We're not going to solve the problems this evening. We're not going to resolve any of these items until we truly allow our administration to go back and continue to run these scenarios with all of these items on the table, bring that back to Finance and Facilities, who then will have probably a 2-hour plus conversation about all of those scenarios, and then come back to the board with a proposal or potentially more than one that they can support. So I want to let everyone know that this is the process that we're going through. We don't have a motion about approving one or another. So this is just open dialogue right now. Okay. So Nick, and then I think we should move on.
Yeah, a couple quick points. First is that another facet to this is we talk about how do we increase the tax base, and you do that by bringing in new business and bringing in professionals that are able to pay higher taxes on more premium properties. by increasing your real estate values. We're talking about all the negative aspects in this and how we can chase it to the bottom. So I see this as one way to have provide less incentive for businesses to come in and to have people, young professionals come in that they're going to be attracted to this district for, you talk about bringing in and filling opportunities in classrooms. When they see their classrooms going up 5, 10, 15, 20% in size, you know, I don't see that as a positive thing for my daughter that's going to be entering the school system. And I think a lot of this, to tie back into my original point, is a consequence of decisions that people have made for the people that they have representing them at the federal and state level. And you're seeing a lot of that effect at the local level now. And the concept that we're going to buffer people from those decisions that they've made and how we finance and pay for things is only going to go so far. You can cut and cut and cut to try to hide that and make it invisible of where those funds are going. But they're going somewhere, and they're not in our schools anymore. Now, we've had members of our board that have put a lot of effort into trying to get some of that action to go. With the School Board Association, which we talked about earlier, trying to get some of that funding that we're supposed to get. But a lot of this is bigger than this district. And you're going to see that impact moving forward, and I think this is kind of a Band-Aid in what you're doing here.
There's no question about it.
It's just a Band-Aid approach.
Mike, can I respond one quick thing? I'll be quick, and I've taken up a good bit of time, but I thought about it going home last night after our discussion, and I do want to say one thing. If you compare it with a business, and a lot of people do that, our business is students. How we treat them, I think, is important. That's very important. But our business, if you were running it on a strictly business standpoint, is students. If we lose a lot of students in this district, and if we hustle districts out of this district or encourage people to leave, we lose students. And the result of some of the losses that we've taken over the last 10 years with Surrey leaving and with Sullivan leaving, that's caused part of this problem. And there has not been a single strong effort to bring any students into this district or even to look at it. The first day that Wynn and I served on this board, I think 33 years ago now, there was a proposal from Marlborough to join this district. We couldn't bring them in then because we were overcrowded. Well, that's not the case now. And we're losing students. We're trying to keep a certain number of teachers here. But our business is students. And from a business standpoint, the reason that we have some of these problems is because we've got a declining enrollment. And not do we have just a declining enrollment like it's true throughout the whole state. We're losing towns from out our current district, which is also causing the decline. And we haven't taken a serious look. I said it yesterday. I think it's important that this is what we got to deal with this year. That doesn't mean that's what we've got to deal with down the road. What we need to deal with down the road is something like a more 4 or 5 year plan, but it ought to encourage trying to bring students in. Keene does a great job of grabbing everybody that we let go and everybody else in the state.
Karen and then Bob.
I was just going to say, last night Phyllis had a very good idea, I felt, of creating was it an ad hoc committee you wanted to do?
Yes.
To work with the state and
Really take a hard look at what we can do, what our options are, and be nonstop about it. Just be nonstop.
And even work with other school boards to maybe talk to the state about some of these issues.
And meet with selectmen. I'm sure there's a lot of good ideas out there. I'm sure there is.
Bob?
I take exception with some of the things said by members here tonight. One of the reasons we're having declining enrollment is that young families are not moving into this district. I ask everyone at this table, everyone at this room, speak with a real estate broker and ask them, are they directing young families to the Monadnock Regional School District? I'm not going to tell you what the answer is. but I challenge everyone here to ask that question honestly to someone they trust.
Where's the chart
And
that we had? On the line?
That's one of the problems with our communities. We're not
State.
attracting people,
Everybody.
and the perception of this district is a big part of that.
Lisa?
Changing the subject, I have a question for
Sure.
facilities. I'm curious if facilities could tell us, maybe not tonight, but if you could come up with an explanation as to why Article 2 and the $1.4 million included in Article 2 is critically important for this year, more important than the 15 teachers, late buses, and reduction in extracurricular programs, and help us understand why that can't be postponed. I'm not trying to present a position on it either way, because I don't have a position on it, but I want to be educated on why that has to happen right now.
Bob, and then Karen.
I've got a Swansea position on that, and that is the needs at Mount Caesar are decades old. They have been deferred for decades already. And I can tell you that the populace of Swansea knows that those needs have been deferred. Thank you.
Karen?
I was just going to say that we haven't had an opportunity to go through all of the warrant articles entirely because we've had such a lengthy discussion on some of the other things, but it's on I believe it's on the agenda for next time.
Yep. Michael?
Right, and then,
Yeah, but very, very quick, we talk about the possibility of eliminating these cuts by not doing Article 2. We could also talk about, instead of doing Article 2, we could replace Article 2 with construction of a new elementary school or a new middle school. Some of the other local districts at the cost of
$1.2 million.
at the cost of 40 million plus. I think there are a lot of things that we do in this district, and the administration should be applauded for getting things done in a very inexpensive manner. And I think a lot, as I've mentioned before, there's a lot of previous generations, to my generation and to my children's generation, that enjoyed those schools when they were new. And I don't think they have a concept of attending a school that's that old, that's appreciated to the degree it is.
Jim, and then we're going to wrap up.
Yeah, Bob and I go at these all the time, but I think it's good. We did get a chart. I'll present this. You said you questioning the enrollment. There's on this chart that we received yesterday, there are 30-some communities in southwestern New Hampshire. And of the 37 communities on this list, or of the 30 or some that are on this list, there are only 2 that had an increased enrollment, one of them being Stoddard, which was slightly, and Surrey, which was greater than that. Everybody else, including across the state average, was down 11%, and they've got areas like Dublin, Chesterfield. One of the big ones was Nelson, off 50%. So we've got things that we can give you to show you that the enrollment is down throughout, not just the district, but the state.
Betty,
Question stands.
I got Betty and Tyler, and then we'll wrap up.
Around the issue of Article 2, you certainly could waylay it. What it is replacing those 6 modular classrooms. They aren't on a slab, they're on dirt. Animals, moles and voles come up into the classrooms. In the hot weather, they overheat. In the cold weather, they're cold. They're just not good educational space. So decide whether you want to hold on to staff, which I would dearly love to do, and postpone that or not.
What I'm sort of curious about it is if our enrollment is down that much, and again, I'm just asking questions, not taking a position, but if our enrollment is down that much, do we need those 6 classrooms? Can we just take them out, get rid of them?
That's a good question.
And would that cost less than 1.4 million? That's just,
Well, I think
I'm
Finance
curious.
and Facilities will tackle that.
That's a
Moving
very good
forward.
question, though. You're right.
Sure.
You should like to.
Tyler, and then we'll wrap up.
So I know this is much more specific than sort of the broad conversation that's being had. I also know that I don't often say a whole lot at these meetings.
They can afford that.
But I really feel it's necessary, just for me as a student, the experience I've had throughout high school, to say that I think our extracurricular programs are very important. Throughout high school, I've been involved in a lot of extracurricular programs, and I think it just makes a difference on students past just what they get in the classroom. It's not easy for a lot of students to say, I'm going to go outside of what I have available at school to find these opportunities that I'm going to be interested in, because for a lot of students, you don't know what you're interested in until you find it. And I think definitely there are students who don't really have access to that sort of stuff outside of school. And on top of that, there are definitely students who, being involved in extracurricular activities, it gives them something to focus on. And there's definitely a population and a demographic in our district that it's tough to sort of find a space where you feel comfortable, because some of the student perspective is like, I have to go to school, and it's hard to sort of open yourself up when you're not doing something necessarily voluntarily. And I think extracurriculars are a big part of that, as students just saying, this is something that I want to do, and it's definitely part of opening yourself up and growing as a person. And I think for me personally, that's definitely been a big part of my my development. Specific to the late buses, I think, while I totally understand the rationale and why the cut is, or the reduction is being made, or suggesting to be made. I know through a lot of the activities that I'm involved in, there are students who wouldn't be involved in it if they didn't have access to late buses, because it's not easy to just say, oh, hey mom or hey dad, can you come pick me up at 4 o'clock? Because not everyone has access to that. A lot of people are working, and it's not always easy to find an upperclassman who has a car to bring you home. When you live in Fitzwilliam and your friend lives in Gilsum, you're like, okay, well, can you drive 2 hours out of your way to come bring me home? It's not so easy logistically from a student's perspective, and cutting late buses it really closes a lot of the doors that students have there. I guess that's most of what I had to say. Sorry.
Good job. Good job.
Okay, so I'm going to make a comment, and then we're going to wrap this up and move on to the agenda, because we do have other items, and this conversation hasn't ended. It's really, it's a conversation that had begun, and will continue to be had. Two pieces that I did reach out to elect Senator Hassan to hopefully have a conversation. So I wanted to share that with the board members. I did reach out to her staff, and hopefully we can have an audience and talk about a lot of these things that we're talking about. We have a reality that we're not funded at the state level and at the federal level. That is the reality. And unfortunately, we're as a district, and we're not the only district. We're being put in a position that we have to address it and deal with it. So I'm trying to get an audience with our congressional delegation, at least at the federal level, and maybe something will come of it. At least get some spotlight on what's going on in the Monadnock region.
Thank you.
So trying. With regard to our towns, and I've lived in this district for almost 20 years. My kids are here, have gone through here. The reality is our communities don't have businesses. Many of them have small businesses, but our job opportunities for our youth are fleeting. And that's, I'm watching my children graduate from college, and they don't have opportunities to stay in New Hampshire. And that's hard as a parent. And it's hard as other parents watching their kids go off to college or go off to school or go try to get a job, and they don't have opportunities in this region. So it is incumbent of our communities to make the Monadnock region a place to build business, to have opportunities, to be creative, to be cutting edge, to do things, not just be. And I hope we can continue to have that conversation with our towns and our boards of selectmen, because it's important. We have industries that no longer exist in many of our communities. And many towns do not have the opportunities any longer, or the opportunities have changed. How many times have we heard from some of our budget committee reps that, CNC milling, how it was done is not the way it's been done now. So we have to have an opportunity for our student body. And the last piece related to it is we needed to have this conversation 33 years ago. It should have been happening. This didn't just change like that. This has been in the works for years. For 20 years since I've been in this district, I chose to move to the Monadnock Regional School District. I chose to keep my kids in the Monadnock Regional School District. And I'm proud of that. And I think we're all proud of that, and it's why we stay in the Monadnock Regional School District. History or opportunity or all of the education that they have gained. But these issues that we were talking about for nearly an hour have not just magically appeared on our doorstep. And we have to be very open-minded to how we're going to solve this today, tomorrow, next year, in years to come. And it's not, I said it last night, it's not a 3-year plan developed in a 2-week cycle of figure out the budget. We also have to, if we are going to look at consolidation or closing of schools or realigning or whatever, that's not our superintendent or administration, that's not their directive, that's our directive to them of what we want the district to look like, or what would it look like if we were going to do this. So those are really important things to take into consideration. And so as we continue to move forward, just keep that in the back of your mind. All right, so we'll move on to the consent agenda. Let's go spend money. So first item is action on the manifest.
Yep, I'd like to move the manifest in the amount of $2,958,995.31.
Is there a second? Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Do we have the money? Great, we have the money. Good. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention. All right.
So everybody was in favor?
Yes.
No abstentions, no noes.
If you didn't raise your voice, you were in favor.
Didn't ask.
All in favor? Anyone not in favor? Anyone abstain? Okay.
Okay.
Anybody have a conflict of interest?
Did you all get your stipend?
I think everyone voted.
I know.
Okay.
And I think it's time, I think I'll ask the question, is there anybody in here that voted who has a salary of a relative or themselves personally in this manifest?
My wife's in it. You know that.
I do.
Yeah.
So you're voting for money that you will get directly. And any other,
Doesn't
and any
give
other
me a
member,
dime.
and any other member who did it No, I think it's a question that certainly has been raised by the public here a couple of times, and I'm asking if anybody else has it.
My wife works for the district.
And it's in this manifest, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay. And you voted for it.
I think that's a meaningless point.
I don't think so. That's why we've had the public out here at least 4 times come before this board and ask if people had conflicts of interest. And I'm making it very specific this time that I think that there are people here who are voting on money that they are getting personally into their family, or that they have relatives that are involved with this manifest and money coming in there. That's a conflict of interest by our policies, in which case they're supposed to notify this board ahead of time that they have a conflict.
Your point is noted. Yeah?
May I say, not remotely. Those are contractual obligations of the district, and all we're voting for is for the district to cut a check. Those are contractual obligations, period.
Those are specific in here because there are specific items with a specific dollar amount in the manifest that go specifically to people who are voting for them. And there are other stipends as well, and we can get to that some other night.
Okay, moving on. Would look for a motion to approve the November 15th
So moved.
minutes.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Yes, Jane?
Yeah, I have already passed these on to Laura, but I had a couple of changes. Page 2, you go midway down under I, it says action items for superintendent. Midway down, it's a sentence that starts halfway over. It says, Jay Fortson said it's not about spending. The reason why taxes went up is because expenditures went down. Revenues went down, not expenditures. So if we could make that change.
That is an editorial change, yes.
Yep. And then, just a couple lines later, the word conscious is there. It should be conscience.
Correct, yep.
And down, I'm gonna go down, dropping now down to C. Under the vote, it says Mike Blair abstained. Mike Blair recused himself, so I just wanted to have that corrected in there. And Laura's already made these changes, as long as you guys approve.
Thank you.
Okay?
Anything further? And thank you, Jane, for bringing that up, because I do want to, now that we're in front of the television, I want to point out to the fact that with regard to the collective bargaining agreement and the proposed teacher contract, because a conflict of interest was just brought up, that here is my signed and sealed proposed contract that was provided to every board member. I did not open it. I have yet to open it. So I just want to be clear with regard to conflict of interest and nepotism and all of the issues. This is a case in point of understanding where it is. So, any further discussion with regard to the minutes?
Yes.
Lisa?
It does say here that A. Bailey, selectman from Troy, asked how many people on the board will be comfortable seeing people lose their homes. What he asked was how many people can lose their homes while you remain comfortable.
And that was on page 1 under public comments?
Yeah.
Okay.
How many people can you watch lose their homes?
Okay. I remember that. Anything further?
Yes.
Yep, Jim?
Since we're on conflict of interest again, on the second page at the bottom under C, at the bottom, there was a question about, actually, there wasn't a question up in Roxbury. There was 2 statements that were made about whether people had a conflict of interest with regards to discussion of the contract. And on one of those, I know that Cheryl indicated that she did not have an interest in any way. I think it's in here, isn't it?
It is.
Yes, it is.
That
It's
statement
referred.
is here. But I think that Scott also indicated that he didn't have a conflict as well. So that's not here, and I'd like to have that added, that he's stated that he didn't have any conflict as well.
That's correct.
If it's not included in the minutes, I'd like to have it corrected.
And for the record, paras do not fall under the MDA contract.
Right.
So,
I think it should just be made clear where we have in the parenthesis for Cheryl's comment that it's attributed to her, not some statement that's made by administration.
okay. Any further discussion on the minutes? Seeing none. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
Abstention.
Okay, one abstention. Everyone else is in the affirmative. I would be looking for a motion to approve the non-public minutes of 9:03.
So moved.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? And I believe that concludes all of the minutes that we had available to us. So the next order of business is setting the next meeting's agenda. I have two items, the CRC warrant in plain English and the CRC talking point motion thing. Obviously, we'll continue draft warrant articles, discussion of the district budget. Are there any other items that need to be added to the agenda that anyone knows about? Or besides finance and facilities, are there committees meeting? I think education's meeting next week.
STEAM's also meeting next
STEAM,
week after
okay.
technology.
Okay, so STEAM, tech, and education. If any of those committees have a motion, please let me know, and/or our superintendent, so that we can make sure that it gets placed on the agenda. As I've indicated in the past, Lisa and I meet on Tuesday mornings to go over the agenda, and we finalize that by Thursday morning when that goes out. Lillian presents that. We do a final review, and it goes out. So if you have any motions from those committees, make sure that we know so it can be included on the agenda, because obviously it's much more difficult to get motions approved on the agenda afterwards. And I don't want to delay things, nor do I want to put things on hold if we can help it. So hearing nothing further, next order of business is public comments. Are there any members of the public that wish to make a public comment? Seeing none. We do have the need to go into non-public, so at this time I'll take a 5-minute recess to allow our TV crew to break down. Thank you, Cheshire TV, for providing the fabulous coverage this evening. Thank you, everyone in TV land. Good night, and we'll see you in a couple weeks.